Hi everyone, welcome back here to our channel. Today we'll talk rental deposits and there's about 4 ideas I want to share with you guys, so let's dive right into it. Firstly, what is the rental deposit? Now, the rental deposit is that amount of money that the landlord might require from his tenant that is separate from the monthly rent, but that's often the equivalent of 1 month's rent, but sometimes more. So it's that amount of money that the tenant is required to pay to the landlord beforehand, but it's not the monthly rent. That is the rental deposit, and that is what we are talking about today, guys. Now, the second idea I want to talk about is why is there a need for a rental deposit? Now, firstly, the law doesn't require every landlord to ask for a rental deposit, but the law does permit a landlord to ask for such a deposit. Now, why would he want to do that? Now, guys, remember, the landlord is giving the use and the enjoyment of his property to the tenant, and obviously there's a risk there that the tenant might cause damage to his property. Now, the basic idea with the deposit is that the landlord will be able to use this deposit at the end of the lease period. If there's any damage caused by the tenant, the landlord can use that money to fix any such damage. Not only that, guys, at the end of the lease, if there's any other amounts outstanding by the tenants to the landlord in terms of the lease, then the landlord can also use the deposit to cover and settle those amounts. And that's why landlords ask typically for rental deposits. Third idea, guys, inspections. Now, it's important for there to be two sets of inspections and both of them joint inspections. Now, let me explain. At the commencement of the lease, it's important for both landlord and tenant to jointly inspect the rental property and to make notes of any existing damage that there might already be. Nowadays, it's very easy to take out your cell phone, take pictures and make video recordings and keep that information as to the condition of the lease or the condition of the rental property at the commencement of the lease. Keep that information together with a copy of the lease agreement and keep it there. Now, fast forward at the end of the lease period, if the landlord and tenant goes through that process again, it now becomes easy to see whether certain damage to the property was caused by the tenant or not. Now, remember the purpose of the deposit. The landlord can, at the end of the lease, deduct from the deposit any repair cost to fix any of the damage caused by the tenant. So this inspection process is very important because it puts both parties in a position to easily get to grips with whether there's any damage that can be attributed to the tenant, and therefore it makes it easier to understand whether the landlord is allowed to use the deposit money to effect certain repairs to the rental property. Very important, guys, this joint inspection requirement. Now, the fourth idea I want to share with you relates to what happens to this money in the interim. We know now that the landlord can ask a deposit and typically does so. And then we know at the end of the lease period, that deposit is used to fix certain repairs to the rental property, which may have been caused by the tenant. But now in the interim, a lot of time can pass depending on the period of the lease. Oftentimes years can pass. So what happens to this money in the interim? Now, what many people don't know, guys, is that the rental deposit, even though it's not a legal requirement to ask for one, when the landlord does take a rental deposit, it is a legal requirement for that rental deposit to be invested in an interest-bearing account with interest to accrue for the benefit of the tenant. So in actual fact, at the end of the lease, it's the capital plus interest less whatever repair cost is allowed, and the balance then gets returned to the tenant. And that's basically, in a nutshell, how the whole deposit scenario is meant to play out in practice. Now, I hope that was useful, guys. I hope you found some value in that. Thank you so much for watching. Next week, I think we'll shift focus a bit, so stay tuned for that. Until then, guys, take care. Cheers for now.